Medford seems to be critical, obviously, since it's where you grew up. I was also struck in your memoir, can you still do the midnight ride of Paul Revere?
Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. The interesting thing, it says, one if by land, two if by sea. Do you know, you're a history buff, how did they go?
By sea.
Yes, because remember, the steed was jumping up and
Right.
down. He was waiting for, and then he saw the second lantern
Right.
in the Old North Church. And when somebody says, where's Medford? I said, well, it's on the way to Lexington and Concord. Yeah. And every year on Patriots' Day, I think it's April 19th, they reenact the ride of Paul Revere, stopping at Gaffey's funeral parlor for a quick tot. They had somebody, a Cub Scout, me one year, reading the Henry Wadsworth Longfellow poem from a big stage in Medford Square. I don't know if they still do it, but I assume they do.
Your sister reminded that it went by the corner of Winthrop and Plaisted?
Right, yeah. That's where our house is right there. There's Oak Grove Cemetery on the other side of the street, and we used to play in the cemetery. That was the playground.
You write very movingly, it's clearly still a tactile memory for you of being a scout, of escorting Amelia Earhart's mother.
Yeah,
that's true. There's a certain, reading it with the kind of biographer's eye, you seem to have always associated public service with the kinds of experiences you just talked about, the kind of public stage, in a way that, I don't want to say pageantry in an empty way, but the civic rituals that hold us together.
That's the way I grew up. I mean, we, as Boy Scouts, we would go to the that cemetery I talked about, and put flags Memorial Day on all of the graves.
Oak Grove.
Oak Grove Cemetery. It was World War II, not the Korean War. A little bit Korean War. It certainly wasn't Vietnam. Vietnam was much later. It was, we always collected money and clothing and that sort of thing for charities in school. That was the world then. Whether it's still the world, I don't know. It depends on where you are, and I'm not so sure every place was the way Medford, Massachusetts was. But Medford, Massachusetts was a reasonably diverse blue-collar city that, everybody worked. I've been very lucky. I wrote in a book one time, if I screw it up, don't blame my parents. They gave me a Norman Rockwell kind of upbringing. My father worked 7 days a week until he checked himself into the hospital to die. My academic record was never stellar, but it wasn't a disaster either. When I talk to young people, they say, well, what's the secret to success? I've always thought it's being the first one in the morning, being the last one there in the evening, taking less vacation. Luck has a big part to play in life, and the harder you work, the luckier you get. I am a believer in what I learned in 7th grade civics. I really, deep down inside, believe that everybody in this country has an opportunity. Some have more of an opportunity than others. If you are lucky enough to be born into a family where your parents help you along, if you're lucky enough to go to a great school and have a great teacher that really makes a difference, if you're lucky enough to have great health and good looks and physical strength, or whatever the case may be. But, the America is built around this premise that you can do it, and there's an awful lot of people who are very unlikely to have done it who did.
Did you encounter in that day and age any anti-Semitism, any discrimination?
It might have existed, but I didn't know about it, with one exception. I remember my father telling me he worked for a bookkeeper for a dairy company, and somebody canceled him going to a convention, and so they let him go to a convention, probably the only convention in his life. And my mother, I remember, went to the library and got books on conventions, how you dress, what you say, how you check into a hotel, literally. Mm-hmm. We lived in a different world. Anyways, my father came back and told the story. He got to Miami Beach, and they said, when he checked in, they said, Bloomberg, that's a Jewish name, isn't it? And he said, yes. And he said, we don't allow Jews here.
How important was the Judaism of your family?
The ceremonial part, to me, isn't as important as the fundamental belief that we should help each other, that we should be honest, that we shouldn't go out and kill each other. I mean, those kinds of things, which are common to most religions, to me, are the important part, and I've always thought that God can't care whether you perform this service or that service anywhere as much as God should care about how you conduct your life. When you have to go before God and say, this is what I did, that's a lot more important than whether you showed up every week